if you look at it objectively, their liberalism is almost like a mass brainwashing. Like I really do feel that when I listen to these people, they are parroting talking points, but when you get to the substance of it, there is no substance of it. It's just, well, black people were slaves. You have to acknowledge that at a certain point there was systemic racism. That's kind of like where it comes from. And the media, I think, plays the biggest role in that, and the education system.
And that's what I try and do. One time I had Steve Miller on my program. Steve Miller was a guest on my show when he's like 14 years old. First time he'd ever been on radio. And as you know, now he's one of the top aides to Donald Trump, one of his principal speechwriters. And after he'd been on my show a number of times, he and I were talking, and I said, what is it about my show that you like? He said, you have the ability, Larry, to change people's minds. You don't just talk. You bring facts, you bring information, and you put it in a way that people can understand it. So I'm very proud of that. It's not just me yapping and bitching and moaning and whining about what I think is unfair and what I think is not fair and all that. I'm trying to get people to rethink their assumptions, and hopefully we're doing that.
Well, you drag people to the cleaners. I mean, it's just like, you don't step to Larry Elder unless you have the facts. I think that's like...
Don't go on Judge Judy's show unless you have the receipts.
That's exactly right.
Don't come on Larry Elder's show unless you have the facts.
You're like the Judge Judy of conservatism.
Bring the facts.
Where you're like, you don't play with Judge Judy.
That's right.
I would love to. We got to get Judge Judy on this show. You don't play with her. And she knows her stuff, and she's not here to play any games. And there needs to be more of that. And that's when I realized, because at that point I had the feeling, but I didn't have the facts. I had to actually research and realize, wow, because you hit on the total myth of police brutality. And at that point I was like, well, we can't say it's not happening. Here's a video, here's an entire video where we're watching Philando Castile be murdered, and yet you just said, what are the facts behind this? What is going on behind this? How many blacks are actually being murdered by police officers? And of course, when I did my research, higher chance of being struck by lightning.
That's right.
Right.
The Washington Post did an analysis of how many people were killed by the police in the recent years, 1,000 of them. 500 of them were white, 250 were black. There were more unarmed white men killed by the police than unarmed black men. I was invited to Ohio State to give a speech before the football team by Coach Urban Meyer, then the coach. He called me and he asked me if I'd come in to talk to his players. And I said, Coach, are you aware that I went to the University of Michigan? And he paused for almost 10 seconds. I thought I killed him. So I came to the class and I addressed all these football players, and they were like this, Candace. They were not having it. They were not having it.
Black and
most
conservative.
Most of them were black, and they were all like this. And I'm sure they thought it was Uncle Tom and a sellout and all the words you've heard before. And I said, there were about 16 unarmed black men killed last year by the police. And you can probably name the unarmed black men that have been killed in recent years, whether it's Eric Gardner or Freddie Gray or Trayvon Martin. I know he wasn't killed by a cop, but he was killed by a guy that purported to be the neighborhood watchman. Sandra Bland, we all know their names. Michael Brown. I said there were more unarmed white men killed by the police than unarmed black men. Name one. Room was silent for almost 20 seconds.
See, that's that Larry Elder thing where you're just like, you realize you don't know anything.
And when you talk to cops, Candace, they will tell you they are more hesitant to pull the trigger on a black suspect than a white suspect. And this has been documented. There's an economist named Roland Fryer. He's at Harvard. He is so brilliant. He's I think he's the youngest tenured professor at Harvard ever, no matter the subject. And he did a study on whether or not the police were using deadly force against black people disproportionately. And he assumed he was going to find out that they were. He was shocked. He said it was the most shocking and surprising finding of his career.
Wow.
He found out the police were more hesitant to pull the trigger on a black person than on a white person. And there was another study done by some researchers at a university in Washington that found the same thing. It's just a lie. And the police and the feds do a survey called I think it's called the Police Public Contact Survey every 2 or 3 years. They ask people if you had any interaction with the police, and if you did, tell us about your interaction, by race, by gender, by whatever. And it turns out they can't find any pattern of discrimination against black people. And I'm not saying that there aren't bad cops, obviously. There are bad talk show hosts, there are bad doctors, or bad lawyers.
They're bad people.
But a systemic, planned out institutional kind of thing, the data are not there. And you know it's not there, because if it were, there'd have been class action lawsuits against the police by all these black lawyers who are around, who are making this argument.
Right. One of the things I was really interested in is just the detrimental effects of these sorts of lies, where people don't realize that the people that negatively impacts the most is always the community that they're trying to help, right? So you create this entire narrative, and what happens? Black people start raising up. We start burning down our own neighborhoods. You have black police officers that are negatively impacted by it, because they're even being called Uncle Toms and coons just because they're pulling someone over. And I had a former police officer here discussing that, how it impacted the black police officers. And I have this theory, I talk about this all the time. There's something about progressive policies and progressive perspectives that always lead to progressive results, right? And we could take this anywhere. We could talk about police brutality. We could talk about other things. Like there's, the whole idea that Black people and white people now, they suddenly don't want Black and white people to get married. Like one of the things when I announced my engagement that I got as comments, right? This was stunning to me, right? Of course you're marrying a white person. There should be Black on Black love. I'm like, so literally, let's just do miscegenation laws again, right? Blacks and whites shouldn't be allowed to get married. Of course, we need safe spaces for Black people. We have Black only dorms in America right now. That is literally so progressive. It's regressive. That is segregation. By a different name, it's segregation. And it's astounding to me that people don't realize that. We're going,
that means the Supreme Court was wrong when they decided Loving versus Virginia and struck down the anti-miscegenation laws in the South. They were wrong.
Right, they were right.
They shouldn't have struck them down. They should have put them back up.
That's exactly what they're saying.
And regarding what the damage this false accusation does, the police pull back. Once you call them racist, and they're afraid that if they pull somebody over who's Black, they're going to be accused of racism. They may even be prosecuted. They may even lose their pension. They're going to pull back. And when they pull back, crime goes up. So outside of Ferguson and St. Louis, where Michael Brown was shot and killed, crime went up. Crime went up in Baltimore after Freddie Gray was killed. Crime went up in Chicago. The very people that these people, Black Lives Matter, claim that they care about, those are the ones who are hurt the most.
Right.
Why isn't Black Lives Matter out here in South Central Los Angeles dealing with the Crips and the Bloods? They're killing each other.
Black on Black, and that goes against the narrative. Right.
6,000 Black people were killed last year, almost all of them killed by other Black people.
Right. As
opposed to a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of unarmed Black people killed by the police. And unarmed, by the way, does not mean not dangerous. Michael Brown was unarmed, but they found his DNA on the officer's gun. He was charging, trying to get the gun.
Right.
So even if you're unarmed, doesn't mean you're not dangerous. But the point is, those are the ones that we care about. When an unarmed Black person is killed, let's deal with them on a case-by-case basis. Almost always the officers are either exonerated or they can't get a guilty plea. And that's because most people recognize that what officers do is dangerous. They have to make split decisions at crucial times, and you have this big presumption of innocence, and you have to find them guilty by beyond a shadow of a doubt. It's hard to do that.
So your facts are racist, right? That's what they tell you. Your facts are racist.
Right.
And the one thing that the Black community hates the most is Black people acknowledging that our community as a whole has an issue, right? Black on Black crime should be discussed. Over 90% of all the killings are Black on Black, right? So why do you think it is that our community never wants to hold the mirror up to ourselves?
Because that would then mean blaming the victim. That's how they see it. It's easier to yell and scream about racism than it is to look at Black people and say, we have to change our behavior. We have to do better. Right. And we have to raise our game. You remember when the Dream Team destroyed the whole world in the Olympics and we won by 40, 50 points? The rest of the world didn't say, let's lower the hoop. Let's widen the hoop for us. They got better. They raised their game. And the rest of the world is no longer getting destroyed the way they used to. We need to raise our game. We need to graduate from high school. We need to stop having children outside of wedlock. We need to do the right thing by the children that we bring into the world.